This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater, joined by a new friend out of Alexandria, Virginia, Nathan Stevens, who is the head of school of Immanuel Christian School over there in, of course, Alexandria, Virginia. And I came across him actually through LinkedIn, and we got connected, hopped on a call, heard about his school and what he's doing. I was like, man, we got to have him on the podcast and him to speak into a couple things. So actually, we're going to dive into something very, very specific today, which I'm really excited about, but I won't steal into that thunder quite yet. I'll save that for just in a little bit. But before we do all that, let me pass it off to Nathan to introduce himself. So Nathan, welcome to the podcast today, sir.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mitchell. I appreciate the opportunity. Well, I'm Nathan Stevens. I am the head of school at Immanuel Christian School, as you've already mentioned. This is year number 2 for me. Prior to this, I spent the previous a little over 22 years in the Southeast part of the United States at different schools in Tennessee, South Carolina, and Georgia. But God made it really clear to me that Immanuel was the place for me and my family. Speaking of my family, I've been married to my wife for 26 years, and I have 3 daughters. One daughter is with us, and 2 are still in the state of Georgia. One is in law school, and one's a senior in college. So that was a big adjustment for us, is to leave a part of our family in Georgia. But God has just been faithful and blessed us here at Immanuel. So anyway, that's a little bit about me.
All right. Awesome. Well, I always start with the same question to start every episode off, but I usually don't give the guests a heads up. So here we go. You ready? This is going to be like the curveball question of the day. Boy. If I was to visit Alexandria, Virginia, what would you say to me? Say, Mitchell, you got to eat this and do this. What are the things I got to eat and do?
Wow. Since we're just outside of DC, I mean, the school sits without traffic, which is really, that's not a real thing. But without traffic, we sit about 20 minutes from downtown DC. And actually just this weekend, I went to what they say is the longest standing farmers market in the same location in the United States. And that was downtown Alexandria. So my wife and I walked through. She was really interested. I was walking through, if you know what I mean. She's like, is this bothering you? No, it's just great. But that was a cool experience. So Alexandria has a lot of history. Where I live is about 10 minutes from Mount Vernon, where George Washington lived. And then DC itself is just full of things to do. I'm new to the area, just over a year, so I'm not the expert at all. But we've explored some of DC, hop on the metro, easy to get into the city, easy to get out. So that's what I would say, just related to the experience in the city, in the area. As it relates to the food, there's so much opportunity here. I mean, the world comes to DC, and that's something that has been really clear to me. We see that in our school. We see that in our community. You see that in DC with the eateries. I mean, there's so much to explore. One of the things that I've really gotten into a little bit more is Greek food. Especially what they do with the chicken. I'm no expert at this, but it's just been a unique opportunity for me to explore in that way. So it's not specific, but you can find anything here in this area.
Sounds good. I've only been to DC once, but I actually really did enjoy it. We did a couple museums, my wife and I, but I can't even, it was so many years ago. That was like right when we got married. So it's been like a decade, but I don't remember any specific place we ate, but I thought actually the feel was actually pretty cool in DC, seeing all the things that you had heard about, read about, seen in books your whole life in school, and now seeing the Capitol building and the White House, all that stuff. I was like, wow, this is actually kind of really surreal to see it in front of my eyeballs. So that was really cool.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. The first time I drove into DC from the school, I just didn't realize the Pentagon is literally off the interstate. Like it's you can see it off the interstate. I kind of pictured it off, protected. I mean, it's very protected, but it's right on the interstate. And then when you fly into DCA Reagan Airport, I mean, you come out of Reagan Airport and there's Washington Monument. There's everything. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I'm with you. That it's really hopefully that doesn't wear off the longer we're here.
Gosh, I feel like it wouldn't, but well, I probably will never live in DC, so I'm sure it'll never wear off for the
Well,
sake of family.
I wasn't going to live in DC either, so who knows?
You never put God in a box. That's very sure. For sure something I try not to ever do. So diving in today, though, let's talk about real quick before we dive into the specific subject we're going to dive into. I'd love to hear just a little bit of background on the school itself, just kind of how big you guys are, how long have you guys been in operation, maybe a couple quick little things about the school you think would be worth sharing, as then we take that and then dive into our specific topic for today.
Yeah. Well, Immanuel Christian School is the ministry of Immanuel Bible Church. The school has been in existence for 49 years, and Immanuel Bible Church has been in existence for 60 years. They're celebrating their 60th anniversary here in the next month. And then we're already preparing for the 50th anniversary. I have a committee that we formed and still beginning to prepare and celebrate God's faithfulness. For close to I think it's about 43 of those years, the school was K-8. And just in the last few years, we've added a high school. The high school was a unique opportunity to respond to what's going on in the world today and continuing to carry on the mission of Immanuel Christian School in the lives of these families. We're right inside the beltway of DC, so we're very close. A lot of our families are involved with government in some way or another, or military. And there really was a demand for us to expand into the high school. There's been great work that I just get to reap the benefit of. Our high school principal, Rachel Reno, who has really been the driver of that initiative for all of these years. Our previous head of school, Steve Danish, was here for over 30 years, and they really kind of came together to imagine what a high school would look like. So there's some unique aspects of our high school. When you're trying to carve it out of nothing, there's some unique aspects. Like every one of our students in the high school travels every year internationally, and that's embedded in tuition, which is a unique part of our programming. Another unique aspect of our programming is we start the day with Bible every day. And so half of the student body, it's a seminar type approach with some kind of small group frameworks around it. But everybody starts Bible at the beginning of every day, which I think is a really strong formative practice for us. It says a lot about what we believe and why we do what we do. But Immanuel is just a really grounded school. It has a real deep connection to the church. It has a deep connection to God's word as a foundation for our work together. And really, there's just been faithful people throughout the years that God has used to sustain this work. And I just am reaping the benefit of that. And hopefully we're building on that foundation. That's how we're looking at our strategy, building on the foundation as we move forward as a school.
Love it. Sounds like there's a great foundation built already. And I know as you have come in for starting your second year, you have a couple things you do it's a couple things you do, but also that you're trying to implement, I think, along the staff as well to help with this thing called practice reflection. And so as we kind of dive into that, our subject for today for that, for those that are listening who have never heard of practice reflection, which when you had first mentioned it to me on our first call, I was like, oh, but I don't, tell me what that is. Tell me what you're talking about. And then I loved it when you shared it. So tell us, let's do a little bit of different things. So you're going to tell us what it is. And then I want to try and go back and forth, role play it, how you're using it and everything. But what is practice reflection?
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit of a play on words, and really it's not unique to me. So if you flip it, and you may have heard of reflective practice. So this concept of reflective practice is that you, instead of just, taking a linear approach and a very technical approach to a problem or an issue, you think more deeply about it. You kind of go into your core values and think about them, and then how does that play out in practice. So that's kind of a layman's definition of it. It's in the organizational learning literature. It's all throughout. So very powerful authors who've really written about reflective practice. So I've kind of flipped that term a little bit, and I'm just wrestling with it. And I appreciate the kind of thought partners. And if anybody who's listening to this wants to be a thought partner, I'd love to engage with you, because this concept of practice reflection is really taking that concept and saying, okay, we actually have to be very intentional about planning for reflection. We have to be very intentional about scheduling reflection. And that seems like, well, that's overbearing, it's overstructured. But I actually think if we don't do that and we don't build those practices of reflection, we're not going to naturally do it at the organizational level. So this is really kind of an organizational or leadership team concept, where I don't know if you've ever read the book Start with Why by Simon Sinek.
Mm-hmm.
So that book, he talks about the golden circle, he calls it, which is basically 3 concentric circles: why, how, what. Why, how, what. Where I think we get caught up as schools, and even Christian schools in particular, is we jump right from why to what. And because we're driven, we're in the sales business, right? We're trying to sell something. So we think if we can have a really compelling why and jump right to what, then people will buy it. And I think that's a short-term play. One of my any colleague who listens to this is going to chuckle when I say this. I call it thinging it. We thing it. We want the next thing. So we have a compelling why, which is, honestly, every Christian school or every school that I've been a part of has had a compelling why. And they've had a lot of what's, but it's the how. It's that middle circle of how that's really where reflective practice plays in. And practiced reflection plays in it. I call it the messy middle, because it's a lot messier to think about how we're going about doing our work than it is about what we're going to do. So this concept of practice reflection is, again, in the literature. It's really about the organization and about groups of people and as they lead. And I would say I really am honing in on the leadership team of the school. The leadership team of the school, I think, is where this whole concept of practice reflection can have such a trickle-down impact. This cascading of this concept through the organization can have such a powerful impact. It's really a challenge to think deeply from the inside out. So I'll give you an example that I've seen in schools. So most of the time when I see the agendas of leadership teams of schools, they will have reflect on this event. So they'll talk about the most recent Jubilee or their most recent event, the picnic for the school or whatever the event is. And so many times our reflection is at that level of events, and we really use the measure of, did people like it? Right? Did they like it? How many people came? Was that something that we would want to do again based on the response of the people? Whereas if you're going to put that through the lens of a more intentional practice reflection, you're thinking about, okay, what is our mission? How do our core values play into this? And are we moving those things down the field? Are we embedding kind of a sense of reflection through our core values out? And so if we're thinking about partnership with families, so one of the things, the biggest questions I got when I got here is, what does partnership mean to you? What does partnership mean to you? It's in our mission. What does partnership mean to you? And I took a lot of time, and I said, can you give me a month? Can you give me a little bit more time than just like in this moment to try to figure out what that looks like? And so what we've done over the last year is to think deeply about, okay, what does partnership really mean? And then where can we go outside of our own heads and our own perspectives where can we go to explore this more deeply, especially as a Christian school? So that's one concept that we've been wrestling with related to practice reflection. And I
Is that
guess,
something?
go ahead.
Yeah, is that something that then are you having your staff or wanting your staff to do something like this after every day when they finish the day of schooling and they kind of sit back and they go, how did today go? How did I mention that quiz properly? And how could I have brought that? Is it something like that? Or is it like, on a weekly, monthly basis? Like, when do you say they should be using it and the school should be using it?
Yeah, I see. I think there's some structural elements, there's some system elements, but there's really a posture that we're really trying to develop more than a system. So I think you have to build it into the system, as I said in the agendas. You think about leadership team agendas. Like, are you going to put it on the agenda and have a deeper time of reflection of how you're carrying out your work, how it's aligned to your mission? As it relates to teachers, so that's a great example, a great question about teachers. I think you can build it into the reflective systems. Sometimes people you're either a relational leader or you're a systems leader, right? And they make that kind of binary. I just think systems are for human flourishing. And if they're not helping humans flourish and reflect deeply or grow, then you need to look at the system. So I guess I would say there's a system answer to that, but there's a posture answer to that. So on the teacher end, the system end of that, you had a guest, I don't know, a couple months ago, Jory Moorcraft, who talked about growth, a growth model of evaluation and kind of building more towards the growth model and isolating the evaluation. I think that's a system that helps reflection. So, like, if you think about building an evaluation or a growth model where people are charged to think through your core principles, like if you establish a set of, we called them at a previous school, characteristics of professional growth and excellence. So you're looking at those characteristics and you're reflecting on your own practices. Like, am I actually carrying this out in the classroom? Is this something that I need to grow in? And then who can help me grow in this? So I think it's both system, like I just talked about with teachers, but it's really about a posture. It's about embedding that kind of those core beliefs through these reflective practices, and then having that posture of reflection. Is it every day? Well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's in the moments. Maybe it's I think about my time as a teacher. And as a teacher, there are many times that I'm right in the middle of a plan that I think is going to go well, and it is not going well. Well, why is that? Is that just because the kids are responding that way, or is it something within the design? And then where would I go to even determine that? So there's a lot of things that are kind of wrapped up into that, but I think it's both system and posture is what I would say.
As yourself and your staff do these reflections, is this something that is fully just mental that they go through, or is it, hey, I want you to document this in a Google Doc that you can reference back to the next time you want to do this fundraiser, this test, this whatever it is, and see, I can't remember, it was 6 months ago, let me see what I put down as my reflection for that time. Or is it something you do encourage everybody to write down what they got from that?
Yeah, I think it's both and. Again, you probably hear me say that over and over again. I don't think it's either or, but I definitely think there needs to be some form of documentation of that reflection. So I think there are different ways that looks. Again, it could come through the system that you build for teachers, your evaluation system, your growth models, whatever. It could also just be embedded in, like, for example, with our team, when we do have a reflective experience. So one example, we just had one around our new teacher onboarding. So we had our new teacher onboarding, and we had established a set of core principles that we believe are essential for us. And it's based off Patrick Lencioni's work in The Advantage, but are essential behaviors for us to live out as a team. So we did a reflective experience as a team, assessing ourselves to those behaviors. Like, did we live this out? How would they have known that? We didn't use those words, but were there specific experiences they had? Were there specific agenda items that would have helped carry that out? So we documented that in our minutes to the meeting. And so when we go back next year, so we'll have a tangible representation of that discussion. But it's really about developing this kind of posture reflection within our team. So if you do that for new faculty onboarding, what is that going to look like when you go to lead your own team in a schedule review or a review of assessment practices, or you fill in the blank? Are we grounding those reflections in something defined and clear and deep and grounded? So anyway, I get it. It's a both and. It's really about a posture. That's the goal. But I think we need systems and documentation to support it.
Hey, school success makers, Mitchell here. I just want to take a really quick break from the show to give a big, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. I absolutely love the Herzog Foundation. I've been friends and partners with them for a couple years now, but we're bringing it to a whole new level. And I'm excited to share that our very own School Success podcast is now featured on the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network. The Herzog Foundation is a powerhouse of resources designed to support schools like yours, from free training events through the Herzog Foundation Institute to their incredible online news publication, The Lion, and of course, our new podcast, Home. They have everything you need to stay informed and inspired. And if you're dreaming of starting your own Christian school or co-op, don't miss their online course, Schoolbox. It's a fantastic resource to help you get started on the right foot. At School Success, we're proud to partner with the Herzog Foundation to bring you these valuable tools and insights. So visit herzogfoundation.com to explore all they have to offer. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these amazing opportunities for growth and success. And I love all the people over there, and I know you guys will too. So please go check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, back to the show. Is this something that to properly do this, a school should have mission, vision, values, like core value, all that stuff to properly do this, or could you do it without those things?
I think you could. I think those other, the mission generally, you could do it without those things, yes, but you're not reflecting on anything in particular. It's like for the educators out there, the teachers who, everybody talks about differentiation, but if you don't have a clear aim of where you're going, it's hard to differentiate for people. So that's a kind of a teaching and a pedagogical approach to this. But as it relates to leadership, I think those other elements outside the mission are kind of the more actionable. Like your mission can be actionable, and I think you should design around your mission. But those core values, maybe core beliefs around learning, those support documents, yes, would definitely be things that you should be able to reflect through. I think what I have seen, and I've done it myself several instances, is we have all those documents. They're all pretty. They're branded. They're on our website. Everybody can see them, but we're not using them and building practices to reflect through them, right? We don't have systems to help support people to reflect through them. So I think if you have those things, it doesn't require a system. I know I've used system probably 100 times now. It doesn't require a system to carry this out. But if you have that posture of reflection that's been developed and you're building that within you, you can look at those documents, you can look at those declarations and really engage and learn and grow without, again, the system.
Is this something you're also doing in your personal life too, with your family, your wife, your kids, like where you're like, you go on a family vacation? Let's reflect on if we actually lived out our family values on this family trip.
Well, my wife is going to watch this, so I better answer this correctly. What's funny is because a lot of this is based. So this has been a passion project for me for years. Just this kind of, I've struggled with like an inconsistency or a lack of coherence I've seen. And so when I started to explore this, I did some of my doctoral work through this and kind of looked at the organizational learning literature. And my wife, when she can kind of repeat all that stuff back to you. Oh, here it comes, and this and this and this. And she says, so what does that look like in our family as she gets closer and closer? And so, in fairness and full transparency, that's an area where we're working through that as a family, and I'm not over reflective when we go on a trip and things like that. My girls have grown up with these kind of systems mindsets. Even my girls were actually students under my leadership, so they don't need any more of that at home. But I think it does apply, and it's a convicting question. It does apply to families as well, and it should apply to families. And we're working through that. I think we're in our third daughter, and we have a 10-year gap between our second and third. So our first two are in this whole nother world, probably different parents, different experiences, and the third is getting a more intentional, not system type approach, but intentional, relational, reflective parents. And so, yeah, that's an area that we can continue to grow, but it definitely could apply for sure.
So those that are listening, would it be for them to want to use this? Would you recommend them even trying it for themselves first, like personally, and then trying to implement it maybe into the team? Because I feel like those that are listening might get a little bit they might be a little overwhelmed. They might go, man, this sounds good, but if I suddenly bring this out into a team meeting and try and do it and it flops, they're going to be like, this person has no idea what they're talking about. This isn't going to work. So, like, is there a way, like, I know you mentioned Start With Why by Simon Sinek, but is there other resources you would say, hey, maybe dive into this resource or practice it on your own first and see how you like it and then roll it out to the team?
Yeah, I think there's two different ways. I mean, I'm generally, I have friends who have told me that, Nathan, you're a top-down kind of guy, and we need some bottom-up stuff happening at the same time. So that's more of the personal part of that. I would say, yeah, it seems so highfalutin. It seems so kind of high and bigger idea. But I think in a practical sense, it's really about, so if I gave an example, like, for example, with a strategic plan. When you think about a strategic plan, we had a consultant come in at a previous school whose primary purpose was to get the strategic plan done, period. Short time period, very intensive, plan done. And that's one way to do it. Our process has been much more kind of process oriented. And the reason that is because it's also, I talked about the Simon Sinek why, how, what. It's also about who. It's also about who. So when we're going through our strategic planning process, we want to make sure we're forming and shaping people through that process. So a lot of this is a process orientation. It's thinking about who is in front of me and how do I help them develop in their way of thinking and leading and reflecting. And yes, that starts with the leader. There's another author, really a strong book around this kind of organizational learning conversation. Is Peter Senge wrote a book, Schools That Learn. And that Schools That Learn is like a handbook for this type of conversation. I mean, it's literally a handbook. It's about that thick, and you can go through and you can engage in some activities and think about how you would lead others through it. So I think you can start to dabble in some of this. You can start to try some of this, but you really need to be focused on who. How am I forming and shaping the who, the people that I am leading in their ways of thinking and reflecting. Peter Senge came up with a concept of mental models. So it's this idea of you're challenging our ways of thinking, our natural ways of thinking. We develop them. Like, we develop them through our own experiences, through who has led us in the past, how we feel comfortable leading. But really it's about, okay, how do I challenge my mental models and how do I get my team to do that? How do I do that? Well, I model that. So my team's probably tired of hearing mental models, because I explicitly tell them, you know what, here's what I think we should do. Here's how I think we should do it. And here's why I think we should do it that way from my own experience. Or because I grew up in a family of 6 and my dad was a pastor and we didn't have a lot of money. So this is why I handle budgetary things the way that I do. Right? So it can start in a really small way, and it's not like it's a thing, it's a posture, right? It's not like a destination, and I can't articulate, okay, well, if you'll know that you're a reflective, now I can't, I've tried to do that, but it's really not about that. It's It's about a posture that we're going to force ourselves to think deeply about who we're called to be and work our way out.
That's good. Good. All right. Well, I feel like people got at least next steps of what they can do to roll this out. If you were to give, so I'm gonna ask two kind of final questions for you. So if I was to give you, if you were to have one thing for people to work on specifically for this, what would that be for the one thing?
I would say the one thing would be try it with your team by focusing on who. So what I mean by that is try it with your team. Think about something, an event that just happened, or whatever it is, and try to go into your core values. Use your core values, that you bring them, whatever your principles are, bring them alongside, like explicitly, and then consider the experience, the event, the project through those. So try that. And then the who part of that is just recognizing you're trying to form and shape and model this for people. This is about living authentically in front of people, helping them grow in this type of reflection.
That's good. All right. Well, hey, I'm going to ask you one final question, Nathan. So if you were to give people one piece of advice, all this has been good advice, but if you were to give people one final piece of advice just for the school leaders that are listening, doesn't have to be on the specific topic we were on, but what would that one piece of advice be from you?
Well, it's been a convicting piece of advice for me over the years. Learn about who you serve. Learn about the who. Know what makes them tick. Know how they think. Ask them probing questions. Because those relationships are formative. They make us better leaders, and hopefully they're making our colleagues better leaders as well.
That's good. You can take that to the school and your family, your marriage. I mean, all that. You need to know who you're doing life with, you're serving, because you can help them and love them better if you know what makes them tick. I 100% agree. That's awesome. Well, hey, Nathan, thank you for taking time out of your day. I know you guys are in the middle of the school year, so appreciate you taking time to hop on here and teach me as well as teach our guests just some of your knowledge from all these years of being in education. So wishing you nothing but the best at Immanuel, and hoping all your daughters will be able to come home for the holidays at least and see you, and even though they're down there in Georgia. And I'm just wishing you and your wife and your school nothing but the best, man. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Nathan for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what he's doing over at his school at Immanuel, and I'm wishing them nothing but the best as they continue to grow and educate the next generation that's coming behind us. And as always, you've heard this every single week, most likely, that all I'm asking is that you guys will at least come back every week and take at least one thing back to your school from these episodes to make your school and yourself better than you are and your school is right now. There are so many really good nuggets of information from these great guests that give of their time to speak and pour into you guys. And I'm just hoping you'll take, again, at least one, but maybe two, back to your school and yourself to make yourself better than you are right now. That is my wish. And I hope you guys continue to come back every week, because we have 3 free resources that we want to give to you guys as school leaders that we're trying to help make you better and more successful. And the first one is what you're listening to right now. It is, of course, the podcast. We're dropping new episodes every Monday. So keep coming back, making sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you haven't already left us a review, we'd love a 5-star review for wherever you listen to podcasts. That would mean an awful lot to us. It does take a lot of time and effort to put these podcasts out for you guys. So that'd be a huge thank you if you guys are able to do that for us. So that's the first one. The second one is we have on our website a free weekly report that we send out on Mondays as well, called the School Success Report. We'd love you guys to be getting that. There's teacher articles, blogs, different highlights, shout outs that we do in there. We want to make sure you're getting that in your inbox every week as well. So go over there on our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. In the top right-hand corner, there's currently a button there you can click and sign up for that. The third and final free resource that we always want to highlight is our free community called School Success Makers, and that is on Facebook. I'm personally in that group. Would love to see you in there as well. Feel free to ask questions to other school leaders that are in there and get to know some other people in that community, because community is so incredibly important. We want to make sure you guys are connected with other school leaders you can bounce things off of and learn from each other. So great people in there. Go join the community School Success Makers on Facebook. Well, we'll be back here next week with another amazing guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.